We're live right now. How are you today, Hassan?
I'm really good. Thanks so much for having me on here.
Yeah, was it a hot day in DC?
It was a very rainy day in DC. We had a flash flood warning, and yeah, so kind of cold and wet.
Okay. Well, I'm in Pittsburgh. I moved here recently from DC area, and it's very nice. Nice here. Enjoying it. Other than that, it's like a serious battleground state, and I'm kind of in a very progressive little enclave called Mount Lebanon, but I mean, like just 5 miles from here, it's like Trump country, you know?
Yeah,
So it really feels like a battleground
yeah.
for the election. And I found out about you from a friend, a mutual friend, who saw that you were posting comments on your or status on your Facebook page saying that you've been able to convince some of your Trump voting friends and family to vote for Biden. And so, of course, I got very interested and just kind of wanted to get to know you and hear how you actually do it.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's a pretty polarized time, and people are having really heated debates and conversations. You know, passions on both sides are really inflamed. I'm not saying that this is going to work for everybody. I think there's a segment of the population that really supports either Biden or really supports Trump, that aren't going to be moving at all. Now, what I found is that my conversations with strangers don't really produce a lot of fruit as far as making a lot of headway with convincing them not to support Trump. But I still try and I try to have respectful, friendly conversations. I think, doing that can move the needle in some ways. But the areas I've actually had some success are with people in my close circle. Just a little bit of background. I come from a pretty conservative family. My family owned a gun shop when I was growing up. My mom still works
Wow.
there. Yeah. So I hear a lot about the Second Amendment at Thanksgiving, and I know a
Mhm.
lot of the talking points. So maybe that has given me a bit of an advantage in a way because I'm used to hearing what Republicans have, what their ideologies are, what, their thought processes are. I was actually Republican, for a while myself in high school before I started reading books and kind of thinking
Mhm.
thinking for myself and thinking on my own and thinking about how, there's some major power imbalances, which turned me a little bit more progressive. Um,
Mhm.
so, I'm going to tell you the story about my mom. I was really
Okay.
upset when I found out that she did vote for Trump. I mean,
Mhm.
I should have expected that. She's been voting Republican my entire life. She's a Republican. We had a picture of George Bush on the fridge for a while that was signed because I think we may have donated to him. And I was really upset by that because of the Iraq War. She didn't like Obama much. She used to call him Low Obama. And that's what it is. And when I found out that she supported Trump, it was just really difficult because I saw Trump as a pathological liar and someone that's taking our country down a road where, democratic institutions aren't going to be respected if we keep this going. So we had kind of heated debates about it, but she really didn't want to engage. And finally, I guess it was in June of this year, after Lafayette Square. So I live in Washington, D.C., and
Mhm.
right down the street from me, maybe a mile point two away from my house, a bunch of peaceful protesters were essentially tear gassed and pushed out of Lafayette Square so the president could hold a Bible upside down and give this weird authoritarian fascist um, speech in front of the church and and then the military essentially has been was occupying at the time the streets of Washington D.C. In a really aggressive way. Some of them were unmarked, I don't even know if they were military. They could have been paramilitary people that were just blending in. I mean, there's really no way to tell. And it was a scary moment. A lot of my friends were being harassed. My female friends were being harassed by these military folks and some of the police officers that were stationed outside the White House and Lafayette Square. And I just, it got to a point where I said to myself, I don't know if I'm gonna go home for Thanksgiving if she's gonna support Donald Trump for it was at the point where something had to give. I couldn't, and just a little bit of background, I my family on my dad's side, they're Jordanian and my mom is white, Italian, Finnish. So there's this split. I mean, I see the president being really racist and prejudiced, like, with the Muslim ban and the wars in the Middle East, and it felt unfortunate that she was continuing to support him. So what I did is I wrote a letter to my mom. I was going to have a conversation with her, but every time we talked,
Hmm.
we just sort of just came at each other. And then she would shut down, I would shut down. So I kind of felt like a letter might be the right format. And I wrote this letter.
Hmm.
And luckily, I sent it to a very diplomatic friend who massaged it a little bit for me. So I would definitely recommend if folks are trying this, that they have a friend that they care about and trust that has their best interests in mind to kind of look it over it. And if you don't mind, maybe I could just read it to you so you can see exactly what I said. Would that be okay?
That would be amazing. Yes, I would love to hear that. Yeah.
Okay. The subject line of the email was, I love you, but things must change. Mom, I want to begin by saying I love you very much. I'm writing this email to address something that's hurt me and troubled me for as long as I can remember. The recent national crises has brought this wound to the surface, and I wanted to open up and talk to you about this. It's still very hard. So instead, I'm writing an email and I'm hopeful that it will reach your heart. Recently, a group of protesters were brutally beaten in front of the White House and gassed and fired at for just being outside with signs in the way of a weird photo op in front of a church. The leader of that church rejected this move unequivocally. Now DC has an occupation. These soldiers are everywhere and they're sexually harassing my female friends. I'm worried for all of our safety. It's getting really bad. For the record, I reject any violence by protesters, but that does not represent 99.9% of what's happening right now. They are very peaceful people exercising their First Amendment rights and getting attacked anyway. I know you can get all this from the news that you may be watching or reading, but I didn't choose to be brown or mixed or Arab uh, or mixed as an Arab or white man. I You chose that for me and my sister when you married our dad, and why do I have to suffer for this? At the same time, I realize this may be very difficult for you because of the way dad turned out to be, and because I'm sure our extended family badgered you for the choice you made to marry a brown Arab man. Not every brown man is like dad. I'm brown too, mom, and I would like to say you raised me well despite the hardships. I truly hope you do the right thing. If you love me, you'll respect me enough to admit that this is hurting me and every minority in the country and that it's gone too far. Please reconsider which leaders you support at this time for the sake of your son and all good brown and black people from all walks of life and from everyone in this country and for everybody in this country. I'm praying for you, and I hope you will respond with consolatory words as my heart has ached for so long. You can help heal me or continue to hurt me. The choice is yours. I will always love you and pray that you stand up for me just the way I am. And so that's what
Wow.
yeah,
That's beautiful.
thanks.
So, did she respond to you right away?
She took about 24 hours. I think she was thinking about it a little bit. And, she basically just said, that's a lot to digest. Of course, I never wanted to hurt you. And I had no idea that your feelings ran so deep. And, I think she kind of said that for me, for politics are really, passionate issue for me. For her, it's not as much. And, she also said, "Did you think I was a Trump supporter, like through and through?" As a matter of fact, he's why I stopped following the news, and I got tired of cringing every time he opened up his mouth or his Twitter page. As far as the current situation goes, it's terrible. First, that guy was killed horribly, and now more violence. I'll never get why it's okay to infringe on people's rights or property in the name of protest. Protest, we are free to express opinions, thank God for it. But burning and looting, is that the answer? I don't think so. Um, and, she basically said, I have no problem with not voting or not casting a ballot for Donald Trump in the election. And so rather, I could have gone and tried to talked about how the protesters were peaceful. I could have said a lot more things on that, but I decided to just let it lie and
Hmm.
just accept that my mom just told me that she was gonna, she voted for Trump in 2016, and then in 2020 she was not going to. So I kind
Wow.
of I kind of felt like that was a good place to, I responded it with kind words, but I didn't want to push the whole protesting piece anymore.
Hmm. So then, has she said like unequivocally that she's not definitely not voting for Trump? Is she voting for Biden or not voting for Trump?
So that's a good question. We haven't quite covered that. She said she's not voting for Trump, which I believe her. It's in writing, and I've brought it up to her several times. So it's, you know,
Hmm.
what a person does in the ballot box ultimately, how I will never truly know. But I take her at her word that she has said that she's not going to
Right.
vote for him. I don't think she's going to be voting for Biden. She might, just to
Hmm.
vote for somebody, but I could see her just not voting for anybody.
Right.
At least
So
at the top of the ticket. I mean, I think she'll vote for
uh,
Senate and House and all these other elections.
do you think that if you hadn't sent the letter, she might have voted for Trump? Or you're not
Absolutely.
sure? She would have? Okay. I mean, what would have gone through her mind as she cast the ballot for Trump? Like, what would have been her rationale for voting for him?
Hassan, I'm a Republican. And that's what we do. We vote for Republicans. So there's a loyalty piece that is really ingrained. She's been voting Republican her whole life. She's going to
Hmm.
continue voting for Republicans. Another thing is, I think the Second Amendment piece is really important to her. One time she said, Hassan, like, our livelihoods depend, not mine. I'm not I don't work at a gun shop, but she does actually work at a gun shop. And so her identity is really wrapped up into, the ability for Americans to bear arms and to own handguns
Hmm.
and go hunting and, be able to protect themselves. So that's a really strong value for her. And she doesn't
Right.
want the federal government to regulate
Hmm.
the ownership of firearms or have any universal background checks or so she feels pretty strongly about that issue. I don't know if she's really conceptually thought a ton about all the implications of some of these things and really like looked at what the other side says. It's just she's been thinking this way for so long, it's hard to unstuck
Hmm.
that.
So, if you had not convinced your mom, right? How would you feel about her as we go get closer to the election?
you know it It was hard. I gotta say, I was kind of at the point where I was really gonna reconsider the time I spent with her.
Mm,
Um, and I love my mom. I mean, she's awesome. We have a great relationship in so many ways. And she's been really awesome to my sister and I.
mhm,
Even after my parents split up, like she just was our rock and helped us out through so much. But it got to the point where it was going to be really difficult for me to
mhm,
continue pretending like it was okay, especially as the country was backsliding toward, as we're wherever we're going on this ship we are. And yeah, it would have been really difficult for me to want to continue to spend time with her and share parts of my life with her.
mhm. Right. So you have other people in your life, family members and friends who are conservatives, right?
Yeah.
And so you've been able to convince some other people, not just your mom, some other people, right?
Yeah, I have. So now again, I think I'm not going to claim like I have all the answers here. I can just tell you what has worked for me and the things that I've done and said. I have a
Hmm.
friend who we went to college together. He's kind of more on the libertarian Republican side. He like Bernie was too far left for him. Um, he supported Trump in the primary in 2016 in the Republican primary, but then ended up voting for Gary Johnson. And then, come full circle, I thought he was on the Biden train. And then I had a conversation with him and he's like really thinking about Trump. I was like, whoa, wow. I didn't quite realize that.
Hmm.
And he was worried about China. He was worried about, that Biden might be pushed too far left. That was a real concern of his. And, I did my best. I mean, we've been talking again. This is a really close friend of mine. He's like one of my best friends. And we're not talking every day. He lives in Plymouth. I live in Washington D.C. But we're in communication, and he respects my opinion in large part because we've been able to like have this kind of banter back and forth with in our political views for a long time. I think in a lot of ways he respects my opinion. Now, climate change was a big one for him. I think that was ultimately the thing that I was able to sell him on because he's got a young child and he is worried about climate change. I think he sees what's happening in California,
Hmm.
sees what's happening in Oregon and Washington State, sees sea level rising, and he's worried about his kid's future.
Yeah.
And I talked to him about, like I know you're kind of lean Republican here, but Biden, he's not super liberal. Like he's got a 30-year record. In fact, one of the things I said, because I'm a Bernie supporter, I said, like, I don't even like Biden, but I'm going to vote for him. Like he's definitely not left, and that actually kind of helped him a little bit to know that I was not super stoked about Biden because he knows that I want universal health care. I want education for folks. I want to
Hmm.
there's a lot of policy. Like I like the Green New Deal, things like that. So I think for me to say that, I was dissatisfied that he wasn't far left enough actually might have helped my case a little bit. Um,
Right.
I
Yeah.
also, yeah, the couple other things that I mentioned. He mentioned how, Iran was kind of taking, sorry, not Iran, China was taking advantage of us, and they're getting stronger and we're getting weaker. And I kind of mentioned that. Well, Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, and they tried to do this resolution to basically extend the UN arms embargo on Iran, and all the European countries and our allies, we had to work with China and Russia to basically humiliate the US at the UN Security Council when they did that vote. Sorry if
Hmm.
that's kind of in the weeds for folks, but and yeah, and he said, yeah, like the killing of the Iran nuclear deal didn't make any sense to me. That's what he told me. Because now Iran's closer to nuclear breakout.
Hmm.
And, I think also I talked about the Yemen war. That's something I work a lot. I'm a peace activist with my job. And I talked about how, like, despite Saudi doing all these crazy things to Khashoggi, to women with the male guardianship system and the kafala system at home, in Saudi Arabia, from 9/11 to supporting Al Qaeda in Yemen, to starving little kids in Yemen. Like, I just can't, in good conscience, you know, it's just really hard for me if people are going to support,
Hmm.
continuing the Yemen war. And that was another thing I talked about.
I see. So for some people, you could talk about policies, like if you know them well enough to know which issues they really care about, right? So you can go right to those issues.
Hmm.
And some other people, like your mom, it's about like her identity and her loyalty and her livelihood,
Hmm.
right? So it's like you have to kind of find a way to connect with each person. That's probably
Yeah,
going to be different.
yeah. I mean, I think you're
Hmm.
right. Like, I think, I question my mom's loyalty to her son.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
like, are you with Trump or are you with your son, who's basically the
Wow.
victim of some of his policies? In my extended family, even with the Muslim
Hmm.
ban, things like that. So I really, yeah, I brought that up. But with my friend Steve, we get into a policy discussion, and
Hmm.
we like to. going to talk about, okay, what are the different solutions? And oftentimes I try not to take a super hard line, even though I have like pretty left views. I say, right now the US our policies are out of balance and we need to kind of pivot
Right.
back to the left a
Right.
little bit on a lot of fronts. And framing it in that way, I think really helps Steve rather than me saying it has to be like my way or the highway, just kind of framing it in, you know,
Hmm.
we've gone a little too far and now we got to come back and really prioritize like climate change and supporting working class people.
I see. So okay, so I know that many people out there are saying, I tried to talk to my mom, I tried to talk to my dad, or I can't get anything past them. They're brainwashed or they're in a cult and I've tried and nothing works. Um, so what kind of tips do you have or what kind of mistakes do you see people making?
Well, this is really hard, and I can't claim to say I know the right answer necessarily for
Mm-hmm.
everybody.
Hmm. Okay.
I don't know if I can, there are some people that really just will never not support Donald Trump.
Hmm.
And at a certain point, you have to make an assessment or a judgment. Um, and to say, is this really worth, getting really upset over? Is this something that I'm going to just be slaving away and banging my head against the wall? One thing I will recommend is that, especially like if you're having debates in public with somebody, try not to lose your cool because it might not be about convincing, the
Hmm.
person that you're talking to. It might be about convincing the more moderate person that's looking at the debate that's trying to figure
Right.
out if they're going to go for Biden or Trump. And if you
Hmm.
keep your cool and you just keep asking questions, like I had a person really challenge me on Facebook recently about absentee ballots versus mail-in ballots, and like, hey, like I don't trust, absentee ballots are is what Trump used to vote in
Right.
Florida. So he used an absentee ballot. I'm like, okay, so that's using the U.S. Postal Service, and but you think the U.S. Postal Service handling mail-in ballots is a big deal, and she just kind of kept coming at me. I'm like, no, I'm not trying to be like angry or like
Hmm.
confrontational. I'm really just trying to figure out why you're okay with the U.S. Postal Service handling absentee ballots but not mail-in ballots. It's the same system. And I think by me being respectful and just continuing to ask the
Right.
question, she made
Yeah.
herself kind of look a little nutty. And
Right.
other people on that page probably saw, and it was definitely a Trump friendly page. And
Interesting.
so I think
Hmm.
that's something else to keep in mind. Just like maintain your ground, be respectful, be thoughtful,
Hmm.
and if you can't and you lose it, dust yourself off and try again because it's really easy to lose your cool, and I certainly have myself.
Yeah. So one thing that I point out to people is that for some people, it's almost like a sport or a game to get liberals to be triggered. They call it like owning the liberals, right? And so that's one reason why I think it's so important not to get triggered and to stay calm, not to give them that benefit. Um, but also, as you pointed out, I call them lurkers, people who may not ever click like or comment, but they're watching and they're reading. And those people might end up being the swing voters in an election, right? Um, and they don't like confrontation. They're probably not always very political by nature, but they do read these things. And so that's one reason why I think it's important for us to find a way to constructively engage instead of only talking to people who think like us and never ever challenging anyone or engaging people who disagree with us. Because a lot of people do that because they feel stressed when someone is challenging them, so they just block them.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep, I think that's a really good point you make. Like
Hmm.
the lurkers, people that are watching the things that you're saying and
Hmm.
posting, and probably maybe they're still on the fence. So yeah, I think try to just don't get owned. I think that's really important, and you know try to pick your battles too. I think there are certain people that really just aren't worth it,
Hmm.
but especially with all this QAnon stuff, and
Oh
it's
gosh.
getting
Yeah.
crazier and crazier. So I'm not gonna say it's. I think there's a shelf life for this crazy, or at least I'm hoping, and
Hmm.
so. But we're in the thick of it right now, and we've got to
Right.
maintain our cool and continue to try to find people that are swing voters, and also beyond just trying to get Trump voters to vote the right way, try to find people that aren't voting at all. Make
Yes.
sure that because there's a whole, I mean, so many Americans, millions and millions and millions of
Hmm.
Americans just don't vote. They feel totally disenfranchised. They don't understand how important certain elections are. Even not even just the presidential, but congressional races, state legislature, governors, city councils, school board, all the way down sheriffs. We care about the Black Lives Matter protests. Well, we better be voting for sheriff, and we
Hmm.
better be voting for local judges who are making really important decisions on our black
Right.
and brown communities. So I
Yeah.
think, on top of that, I definitely don't want people to forget that they need to just encourage non-voters to vote as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one thing that I pointed out to my Bernie friends, never Hillary people, Bernie or bust people in 2016, um, was that I was worried about all the political appointments, including all the judges, that all the political appointments that would be made by Trump and his administration. And that, like, a lot of people hadn't thought through the implications of that. Not just the Supreme Court, but all the federal
Yeah.
judges and all just the thousands of political appointments that are made. Um, and that actually, I think, convinced some of those people because I think they were just thinking about the election as Hillary versus Trump.
Such a
Yeah.
good point you make. And
Hmm.
it's never just one person versus another person.
Hmm.
It's really about, you're not voting for one person, you're voting for literally thousands of people that are going to
Hmm.
be taking these jobs in these government bureaucracies, in the federal government, people that are running State Department, running the National Security Council,
Hmm.
people, that are running USAID and providing humanitarian assistance to
Right.
places like Yemen. And it's so many things are impacted by it. It's never just one on one or one person versus another person, just like you
Hmm.
said. And yeah, I think that's another really important point to make when we're talking to people that might be on the fence and might not be super motivated. Just how many people that will be impacted by this decision.
Yeah, and also just how they would shape our institutions that we rely on for services.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think we just got to get people to kind of think beyond kind of this very Mickey Mouse way of thinking about the election is like it's like a battle between two people and their personalities. But you're really talking about giving someone extraordinary power to reshape our
Yeah.
federal government. So one other thing I really wanted to go over with you is, if you don't mind sharing, um, what is your relationship with your mom like now? Did it sort of suddenly become better after this exchange?
You know, I felt I could just like rest easier when I'm talking to her a little bit. I I don't really even bring up politics anymore. I'm just like, okay, I know where you stand on the issues. She threw me a bone. Like I think till after the election, I might just kind of make sure that she's not voting for Trump and can kind of
Hmm.
reinforce that and remind her and even show her the email she sent where she said that. So I got hard proof now. Um, but yeah, in general, like I think things are pretty light and fun now. It's
I
just
see.
taking a bit of the weight off.
Hmm. I mean, I love, love, love the letter you wrote to your mom, and I, it just touched me, you know. It got me kind of choked up actually. Um, I'm just wondering if how do I ask this? If love is an issue in this election, I think hate is also an issue. I feel like there's a lot of hatred against people. And Thomas Friedman wrote a column today that came out today about this, that Trump supporters really, it's not that they love Trump, they just hate the left. They hate us. Do you think that's true?
I mean, I think Thomas Friedman has discredited himself on a number of occasions. So I wouldn't believe anything that that man says.
Right.
But let's just take the question as is. I mean, ever since he championed the Iraq War, he should
Right.
definitely quit
Right.
journalism and just kind of move
Yeah.
on with his life and maybe, try to do something more productive than continue to put his ideas out there.
Redeem himself.
Yeah, you know.
Uh-huh.
But so yeah, I think it's such a complex question. It's hard to put. I want to really get us out of the whole, you're a Trump supporter and you're a hater. I mean, my mom was a Trump supporter until I talked to her about what this meant to me. I don't think my mom's a hater. I think she's a person that works really hard. She, spent a lot of time trying to make sure me and
Hmm.
my sister were okay after, a pretty brutal divorce with my dad. Um,
Hmm.
and someone that has shown me nothing but like love and compassion my whole life. I
Hmm.
would not call her a hater. I think she was just stuck in a framework of I've always voted Republican, and so there are definitely rabid conservatives,
Hmm.
like probably 30% of the country or 30% of Trump supporters even, which is less than 30% of the country, just really are operating from a framework that's, I don't, maybe it's hate, if you want to call it hate, they really have a
Hmm.
lot of disdain for the left and love for their weird cultish, authoritarian leader. But there's that number kind of, it runs the gamut, where like there are people that are, more moderates that I think
Yeah.
could be swayed. So I don't want to just get into this whole like black and white hate
Right.
versus love. And does that make Thomas Friedman someone that like is on the love train? I mean, like that's
Right.
I think we've got to
Yeah.
get out of this like black and white
Right.
dichotomy and start talking to each other.
Hmm.
And people are hurting all across the board. I think, COVID has got people scared. They're out of work. Um, you know, and what people really need right now, I think a lot of the populist messages that Trump is putting out there are resonating with a lot of people because guess what? Populist messages are popular. And ending endless war is
Right.
popular. Like, a
Yeah.
lot of the things that he's saying are actually popular. It's just the execution,
Yeah.
the way he's doing it is not
Right.
good for the country. And he's like talk about draining the swamp. I mean, this place, I live in DC. This is the swampiest it's ever been.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, okay, there are two things I just want to share. I hope you don't mind. But two things that really concern me right now about our country, just more broadly, not just the election. The election is scaring the crap out of me. But one is I fear that we're not paying attention or we're not taking seriously enough the potential violence from the right, the Boogaloo and
Yeah.
Proud Boys and the alt-right, the militia movement, incels. I mean, there are some incredibly frightening things going on that I feel like we're not taking seriously because we're too focused on kind of what's right in front of us, which is like Republican versus Democrat, when there are these kind of fringe elements affiliated but not the same that can really, you know, kill people and hurt us.
Yeah.
like real domestic terrorism. So I worry that we're not taking that seriously enough. The other worry I have is very different, which is I wonder if the left, and I'm also Bernie and Warren Democrat. Um, I worry that there's an elitism problem on the left, that we do talk down to people, that we do tell people more or less they're stupid, right? And and I see it happening all the time. I know a lot of it is just based on frustration. People feel so frustrated, like how can you possibly believe this conspiracy theory? Or how can you support this crazy person? So I know it comes from frustration, but I just worry about how we might be contributing to the division in our country, this just in this kind of inadvertent way, because um, yeah, we do feel superior.
Yeah.
I mean, does that worry you at all?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, the Boogaloo Proud Boys are absolutely terrifying and all of that stuff. Maybe
Mhm.
if we have time, I'd like to tell you a story.
Yeah.
Right after the Charlottesville attack on Heather
Hmm.
Heyer and the Tiki Torch Brigade and all of that, um, there were kind of other solidarity rallies like Reunite the Right, the Patriot Prayer folks. They they marched in Berkeley, and then I was in Chicago at the time where I lived, and me and a bunch of peace activists, we basically organized a solidarity against white supremacy rally and got about 3,000 people into downtown Chicago. And but this whole thing, I started trying to figure out like who is Patriot Prayer, who is this alt-right movement, and I just wanted to do some research. Ended up like friending the leader of Patriot Prayer on Facebook. And after following him for a couple weeks, I sent him an email, a little Facebook Messenger, and I said, his name's Joey. I said, Joey, like I've just been kind of listening to what you've been saying here. I'm just curious, if you had a moment to chat. Within 15 minutes, he calls me up. So I'm talking to the leader of Patriot Prayer. The
Hmm.
guy, one of his guys was just killed in Portland, and we had this long conversation. He was very warm. He was actually like a warm, friendly
Hmm.
human being.
Yeah.
And I was a little surprised by that. And I asked him, I'm like, okay, what do you think? He really believed in term limits. He actually ran for Congress at one point in Oregon. I think I saw that. And he didn't know about campaign finance reform because he really cared about corruption. He's like, yeah, it's so corrupt in DC. I'm like, yeah, that's why I
Hmm.
was for Bernie. I wanted to stop money in politics. And I told him the story about why that means so much to me. He kind of told me how it meant a lot to him, but he didn't really know about campaign finance reform and how money is, there was a basic comprehension that he didn't have. And I'm assuming that that's probably across the board, in a lot of these movements, they don't really understand our government. They're not taught about civics. They're not taught about, all the things that, yeah, and they feel disenfranchised in a lot of ways, and they're trying to take matters into their own hands as a matter of like patriotism. They're like, yeah, I feel like things are going off the rails, which in a lot of ways they are, but they're just using, extremism as a way. And I'm not saying that I changed his mind, but I have his cell phone number and we've talked a little bit and I've tried to make him, you know,
Hmm.
use his platform to talk about things I think are more positive, which are like campaign finance reform and not like, getting into the
Right.
like extremism, white supremacy. And I'm wondering if enough people said that to enough of these folks and actually took the time to have conversations, maybe we wouldn't be in the shape we're in right now.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. I think that's a good point. You know, I think that's connected to the complaint that a lot of people had about Hillary Clinton in 2016,
Yeah.
um, which is there was a certain level of transactionalness and aloofness, in her and in the campaign, and that she couldn't really maybe see or connect with the level of pain that people were in,
Yeah.
right? And that I think are, very valid, because a lot of people didn't recover after the financial crisis. And there are whole communities that never recovered, and that like we weren't really ever addressing that. We were kind of taking this attitude like Obama saved the economy, everything is good. What are you complaining about? I mean, I don't know. That might be unfair, but I think that was the message that some people got in the heartland. And do you know what I'm saying? Do you think that's
I know exactly what you're saying, and I have a lot of
mm,
criticisms of the Obama administration as well. I really do.
mm,
And I think that maybe helps when I have conversations with conservatives is that I'm
right?
willing to bend in certain ways. I'm like, yeah, I am critical of Obama's intervention in Libya. I am
Yeah.
critical of how the Recovery Act, happened. I think in large part it was actually really good in a lot of ways, but just, the bailout of the banks and the fact that,
Hmm.
there weren't really strong rules to kind of prevent another financial collapse from happening. And just in general, it just seemed like the banks got bailed out and we got sold out. I mean, that's
Right.
so, if you run on hope and then people feel hopeless after you do that, well, guess
Hmm.
what? They're going to go
Hmm.
to their authoritarian tendencies. I think that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
Neoliberalism has really failed in a lot of ways to provide, a rising standard of living for so many millions and millions of
Right.
Americans, and they do feel hopeless.
Right.
And the answer isn't, extremism. I think the answer is actual economic policies that benefit working people. And I think they might not understand all of the policy details, but I really believe like universal health care and education for folks that's affordable, like ending endless wars and not doing it the way Trump does, but
Hmm.
actually ending the endless wars. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really good point you make.
Yeah. I mean, I think, if we're able to be candid with people and ourselves about things that went well, things that didn't go well. I mean, I just think it's important for us to be able to have these conversations and not be afraid, to say, oh, you should never criticize Obama because the right wing has been so severe and racist towards Obama. So therefore, we can't say anything critical of Obama. We can't say anything about Hillary. Poor Hillary. Look how she was treated. I can't say anything about. I mean, just the inability for us to talk candidly about things, I think, is one of the things that the right wing is responding to. They call it censorship or not respecting free speech, and I think there is some truth to that. I think we muzzle ourselves in a variety of ways, and I find it stifling myself. The whole, I don't know, they're just for me it's so important for our democracy to be able to sustain this kind of conversation where we can talk as fellow citizens about how to problem solve, how to innovate, how to make decisions about our collective future. But if we're constantly just like cheerleading and rooting for our team and not able to have these conversations, then of course we can't build trust. And of
Yeah.
course we can't bridge the divide. We're just going to be stuck in our silos, with our variety of reasons why we can't speak up.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And
Hmm.
I think, when we just become the red team or the blue team, we sort of miss so much and so
Yeah.
much potential common ground. Uh, so one thing I do a lot of work on is trying to end U.S. military participation in the Saudi-led war in Yemen, which has brought, 14 million people to the brink of famine. We've seen a child die every 10 minutes in Yemen because of
Mm.
starvation. And the U.S., starting with Obama, has been militarily supporting this war. And Trump inherited the war and he kept it going. Five of the Trump vetoes so far have been
Hmm.
on Yemen and Iran, and I've been working on advocacy around all of these bills. And each of those got to his desk only because we got Republicans to vote with us, vote with
Right.
Democrats. We had 8 Republicans vote for the Iran War Powers Resolution. Trump vetoed it. We had 7 Republicans in the Senate vote for the Yemen War Powers Resolution, vetoed it. We had Republicans vote for weapons, resolutions to block weapon sales to Saudi. And I guess I just bring that up because, a lot of people just think like Republicans bad, Democrats good, but some of those bills,
Mm-hmm.
we had Democrats vote against it and Republicans vote
Right.
with us.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not just get into this narrow, line of
Right.
thinking. And we might come at it from different angles, and that's okay. I think that's fine. That's how you become
Mm-hmm.
someone that brings people together. Like where a lot
Mm-hmm.
of Republicans, they care about the humanitarian crisis, but what they really care about is the fact that Congress never authorized the war under Obama, and that they hadn't authorized it under Trump. And then a lot of
Right.
the Democrats were concerned about the humanitarian crisis, but guess what? The views overlapped and we could come together and pass, and it was the first time in 45 years that Congress ever
Right.
passed a war powers resolution. And we
Mm-hmm.
did that
Yep.
because of bipartisan support.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you because I've done some lobbying on Capitol Hill myself on human rights issues, and we absolutely needed to work with the Republicans, and that they were championing the cause in some cases. So, and also, I mean, some of my best friends are Republican, and and that I don't think of them as evil. I mean, we disagree a lot, we argue a lot, but I mean, the reason why I can be really good friends with them is that they also really value this kind of conversation and a back and forth and willingness to really be fair and look at all sides of the matter, right? And that's kind of what I'm most passionate about is are we able to have a constructive, respectful conversation that would match the requirements of a democracy? Because right now it's not there. And the reason why I keep doing these Facebook conversations that go on for a while is because I believe in it. I believe in it. I think we've got to do this. And I want to show people that it can be done. And it doesn't have to be like everything was reduced to a soundbite and then it's about people just taking a side. I can't, I just find it suffocating.
Yeah. Well, let me know next time you have a Trump supporter on here to talk.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I really want to. I've got to find someone who's willing to because everyone I've asked has turned me down so far
Wow.
because they feel like, it's a progressive page and people are just mean and they don't want to subject themselves to it. Because last time I did that was back in 2016 and it was horrible. Like the comments were so vicious. And so, yeah, I would love to. It's just that, like, no one wants to join me thus far. Maybe you can find people, but so far I haven't had luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if I find anybody, I will definitely let you know. And I think
Okay.
I appreciate what you're trying to do and start a really important dialogue. You know,
Yeah.
I would just say that, getting convincing people is hard, but
Hmm.
I think having a respectful conversation, even if it doesn't yield the results you might have wanted, can maybe
Yeah.
open you up in ways it might be beneficial to you. I think
Oh,
it
yeah.
and in addition, I
Absolutely.
think it's really dangerous when we become so siloed that
Hmm.
we're not, we've blocked all of Trump people on Facebook. We've
Right.
cut all these people out of our lives. And, I was getting close to doing
Yeah.
that with my mom, not indefinitely, but at least through the election cycle. And I think we run the risk of pushing people towards their authoritarian leader. And that can be a really difficult part is if we stay in their circles, in their friend groups,
Yeah.
even if they support Trump, they might be less radical. So,
Yeah,
so that's something
exactly. I
else to
think,
consider, I think.
yeah, no, I mean, exactly. People feel alienated and they're going to be attracted to a tribe of people who are saying, come on in, join us,
It's a really good point.
and so yeah, no, I definitely see that, and I would like to invite everyone to think about how it is that, we can connect with people just at the humanity level and see if we can suspend judgment and just, focus on talking. And I think it's going to help with elections because if you speak from the heart and you are respectful about it, like you obviously were with your family and friends, I think it's going to yield good results. I remember having tough conversations with my parents when they were Republicans, and it was 2006 when I convinced them to vote for Democrats because of the war, because I knew they were unhappy with the Iraq War. And so I made a big push in 2006 for them to actually start voting Democratic, and they have never gone back. They have been voting Democratic since. And so I don't know. I just really believe in the power of people to connect with each other at that human level and really make a case from your heart. So I don't know. I hope that doesn't sound too preachy to people. I really appreciate you sharing your story and reading your beautiful letter. I think it's a great model, really, for how to like reach people beyond the political partisan level and just talk about what really matters to us.
Yeah. Well, thank you
So,
so much for having me and for putting on,
mm,
these just great discussions. I think it's so needed right now, and I appreciate everybody
yeah.
that's watching.
Yeah, so thanks everybody. Yes, feel free to send me suggestions. You can find me on Facebook, Annabelle Park. You can also send a message to the page or leave a comment on this thread, and then see if we can figure out other ways to, have an inclusive conversation about our country. Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you, Hassan. Have a good night. Hang in there.
Take care. You too.
Bye bye.
You've been listening to Conversations About a Way Forward from Count Me In to Win and The Talk on Main Street. To learn more, find us on Facebook at The Talk on Main Street.